Jessica Crow. I'm the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights. And I'm so excited because today I have with me Maria Ross. Thank you so much for being here. Maria Ross. So she's a keynote speaker, an author, a strategist, and an empathy advocate who believes cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. I agree with that. She's the founder of Bread Slice, and she advises organizations on how to leverage empathy to better engage and connect. She, like I mentioned, she is an author. Her most recent book is called The Empathy Dilemma: How Successful Leaders Balance Performance, People, and Personal Boundaries. That already sounds like a must read, and I have been reading through it. So I'm excited for this conversation today. That's not her only book. She's written several books. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a workshop trainer. She's sort of done it all. So just so excited to have you here today, Maria. Thank you so much. Before we get into some of the questions that I have, do you mind sharing a little bit more about like, who you are, how you got to where you are, your origin story, so to speak?
I'd love to. I'm so happy to be here. I love talking with like-minded people who are also on this same mission. But as you mentioned, I'm an author, a speaker, a strategist. I've worked in change management early in my career and then went back to my love of marketing. So I was a marketing executive for many decades, both on the client and agency sides. And with that work came an appreciation and an understanding that empathy was a superpower in order to be an effective marketer, leveraged in a genuine way. If you're able to connect and engage with your audience and understand who they are, what their values are, their fears, what keeps them up at night, you have a better chance of motivating them to action. And that was true even in my change management work.
Yep.
Even if your audience is an internal audience, it's a team or a group of people that you're trying to transform or motivate for a specific purpose. And so empathy really was this superpower. And working with a coach, I realized it was sort of this recurring theme I hadn't noticed through my career.
Mhm.
And for personal reasons, years ago, after I'd written a few books, I really wanted to dive into empathy. It was about 2016. My son was about 2.5 at the time, and I was reading him all these great stories about sharing and collaborating and empathy. But our role models of both, leaders and organizations were not great in the
Right.
headlines around that time, whether you want to talk about business or you want to talk about politics or whatever. And I was getting really frustrated, and I got very disheartened about, well, what kind of world is my son going into if
Mhm.
I'm teaching him all these things, but it doesn't matter? And
Right.
so I stubbornly was like, no, it has to matter. Let me go research the people, the brands, the leaders, the teams, the cultures that are winning with empathy. And let's highlight them. Let's normalize them instead of them being outliers.
Yeah.
And I was so thrilled to find all of the data and the research that made the business case for empathy. And so I take a very practical approach, not only in my marketing, but also just in research. And so I really wanted to write a book for the skeptics of the
Yes.
ROI of empathy, the business case. And that was the Empathy Edge.
Yeah.
And then from that work in doing workshops and keynotes and having conversations with all these change leaders, it was like, okay, there was all this group of people that said, we're bought in, and it's also really hard. Here's where
Yeah.
we're struggling. And now we're talking post-pandemic, right? Coming out
Yeah.
of the pandemic, coming out of all of that flexibility, and these leaders were just getting squeezed between the demands of the business and the needs of their people.
Right.
And with this new leadership paradigm that we're in, I really wanted to write this next book, which is the one that's out now, The Empathy Dilemma, to help leaders with a both and philosophy. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
either empathy or performance or accountability or, your own mental health. It can be
Right.
both and.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, you talked about empathy has been weaponized. Can you tell us a little bit about that statement and what that means? And it really builds on what you're saying, but just so the audience can better understand the context that the book was written in and how it, the message you're trying to convey.
Yeah, yeah. So the first book came out pre-pandemic. So that was based on like the movement around humanizing the workplace and the quote unquote new world of work, which by the
Yeah,
way is here. It's no longer like the future of
right.
work. It's here. And then the pandemic just accelerated that. It wasn't that it was like something brand new. It was just now there had to be a need
Right.
to,
It brought it forward.
yeah, it brought it forward in terms of treating your employees like whole people, creating inclusive environments, creating a workplace where people are seen, heard, and valued. There was movement towards that before the pandemic. And so, writing a book about empathy before the pandemic and now writing this one after, it's about, okay, understanding where are we now that we've come out, we're coming out of this, and we're
Right.
struggling with things like layoffs and return to office and, all the
Right.
flexibility we got to enjoy during the pandemic. There's leaders who are like, okay, now I can go back to my safe little world of status quo. And,
Right.
that was only temporary, that I had to treat everybody like human beings. Now they got to get back to work. And I think there's a happy medium in there of like, we can keep all the good stuff that we learned during the pandemic and translate that into the new paradigm of leadership, which,
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, and this because your work, it's not going away.
No.
We've
Right.
seen the way we can innovate and the way we can collaborate and the way we can work effectively, and we're not going back. Like, I'm
No.
sorry.
Right.
And I have empathy for the leaders that are struggling with that, right? So, yeah, when I talked about weaponized empathy in the book, weaponized empathy is a term that I coined. And I always like to be super clear that we're talking about outliers here,
Right.
because a lot of it is about people that understand that their bosses are very empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
maybe negatively empathetic, in that they are submitting and they're trying to people please, which is not empathy. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
taking advantage of that by using the hot button phrases that they know are going to get the attention of their manager or of HR, like, oh, you've crossed a boundary, or, oh, I'm going to need some mental health days to process that you asked me to work
Right.
overtime once. Like,
Right.
we've
Right.
gone. So again, I always like to point out those are outliers. It's great that we're discussing mental health in the workplace. It's great that we're recognizing that we need to recharge and rejuvenate in order to do our best work. But there are some bad actors out there who are like, I'm going to take advantage of my manager's empathy and I'm going to use it against them. And that's what I
Right.
call weaponized empathy. And that's the thing that's burning out so many leaders that are trying to do the right thing.
Right. Yeah, I love that you create space for this conversation because it is something that we need to discuss in a healthy and productive way. Because to your point, it is the outliers that are having this large impact on overall empathy in the workplace.
Yeah.
What is your definition of empathy? Maybe we can,
Mhm.
and just clarify that so everyone understands how to think about empathy and like different types of empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to define empathy in the workplace, because there's
Yeah.
actually there's the definition of empathy has changed over time.
Hmm.
Almost every expert I've ever interviewed has a slightly different definition of empathy. But the lens through which I do my work, and the one that seems to really make sense in a workplace environment,
Hmm.
is that empathy is the ability to see, hear, and where appropriate, feel. So, where appropriate, feel
Right.
another person's perspective, and then to further use that information to act with compassion. So,
Mm.
compassion is
Yeah.
empathy in action. You
Right.
have empathy with someone, you're in it with them, you're listening to their point of view, you're asking questions. And then what's your next step? And that doesn't mean your next step is change your mind or agree with them or do something different just because they want you to. But the next step could be something like just holding space. It
Yeah.
could mean listening and letting them vent. In some situations, both personal and maybe even professional, it's giving them a hug. It's putting an arm
Right.
around them. It's giving them the afternoon off to process something.
Right.
So, you can't really make that next empathetic action until you engage with empathy with the person and you're actually seeing things from their point of view. But it also doesn't mean you can't do that and make tough business decisions. And
Yeah.
I've done
That's true.
podcast episodes about layoffs with compassion, for example.
Yeah.
It's that makes nobody happy, but
Right.
sometimes you have to do it. And so how can you do it in the most empathetic way possible?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think this is going to be refreshing for leaders to hear and understand. Um, I love the example of having empathy with layoffs. But what are some of you touched on this a little bit? What are some of the myths around empathy? Like what is it not?
Yeah, I think it's actually so sad to me because I spend a lot of time debunking these myths, because 80% of the time, this is what's getting in people's way of understanding how they can embrace empathy as a strength and
Hmm.
achieve, strategic advantage, competitive advantage, leadership advantage through empathy. So one is that empathy is the same thing as being nice.
Right.
And it's not. Being nice
No.
is really, is really more about like, I'm going to do this for you because it's going to make me feel good, but also this is what I think you need, right? That has nothing
Right.
to do with your point of view. So it's not just being nice. Being nice is awesome, but it doesn't mean I see your point of view.
Right.
And it doesn't mean I'm sort of seeking to connect with you on that level. It also doesn't mean, as we said earlier, caving into unreasonable demands.
Mm-hmm.
I can be empathetic, but still hold my ground in terms of, hey, we need to have this difficult conversation about your performance. And you're not going to like it. And you may not like a demotion or not getting your bonus or whatever, but it doesn't mean I have to do everything you want. And that's where a
Yeah.
lot of leaders are burning out because they think that's empathy, but that's actually submission.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then finally, it's not about agreeing with someone. So I can have an empathetic conversation with you just to understand your point of view and your context and why you think the way that you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I have this in the book. Empathy is not about conversion, it's about
Mm-hmm.
connection.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this in the example of people who disagree across political lines. The
Mm-hmm.
goal is not to convert someone to your ideology, but to have a debate that says, I still don't agree with you, but now I better understand where you're coming from. And now, because I'm not so defensive, I'm meeting you with empathy instead of fear and defensiveness. Maybe we can find some common ground.
I really love that. I hope everybody listens to that statement right
I
there,
know. I know.
especially now and as we lead
Yeah.
into November.
Yes.
That's a really, so thank you for that. Well, when it comes to, there's actually an example in the book too. I think the characters, not their real names, but Alex and Janet. And so you mentioned, submission. And I think this is one that I want to kind of bring up too, because in the context of change, organizational change, there's a lot of conversation around resistance and employees
Mhm.
pushing back and employees not being ready for change. And
Mhm.
then, in those moments, I think there's there's that tension. Are we
Mhm.
going to move forward? Are we not? Like, how are we going to manage this or advance the organization? And I think that empathy piece could really be powerful here, but
Mhm.
some confusion around like what people need in those moments because change is challenging and sometimes we misunderstand what people need. So do you have any perspective on that, or do you want to provide any clarity around the example of Alex and Janet, for example?
Yeah, so I had an example of I believe Janet was the manager because I changed their names, so I
Yes,
can't
you
remember, but
did.
Janet was the
Yeah.
manager and struggling with an employee who was really not delivering and
Yeah.
was legitimately going through some mental health crises
Hmm.
and gave her a lot of space to take care of herself. This is in the crux of the pandemic.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, this manager was trying to have conversations and trying not to delay the conversations of, okay, you need to take your time, but then we need to talk about these performance issues because the team
Hmm.
still has goals. The
Hmm.
team still has things we have to perform on. And so we need to have a conversation of, A, what do you need? How can we support you? And B, is this the right role for you?
Right.
And the employee was basically dodging conversations and just
Yeah.
extending mental health leave. And anytime there was an appointment, it was canceled on the calendar. And this manager was really taking this on themselves of saying, what am I doing wrong as a manager? I'm trying to be an empathetic manager, but I also am accountable. I'm also like here to do a job and very clearly. And not only that, she realized that it was being unempathetic to the rest of the team to continue to
Right.
let this fester over and over and over again. So finally needed to have a conversation, but realized that her constant bending over backwards was creating a dynamic in the relationship where the other person was taking advantage of it a little bit, probably for very genuine reasons at the beginning. But eventually we have to be two adults that come together and say, this is not working, right? We
Yeah.
can't ignore it forever. And it doesn't mean it's your quote unquote fault or our quote unquote fault, but we got to figure out a way through it because that was actually Janet's job, was to
Right.
figure out a way through it and help her team through it because they were spending extra time. They were working extra hours. They were doing all these things and they were burning out. So even when she tried to take on some of the work herself and sort of shield her team from it, basically no one was winning.
Yeah.
So I think really, that's just one example of many in the book where how I got to the 5 pillars of effective but empathetic leadership because I had interviewed hundreds of people on my podcast. I had done years of research, and these common threads kept cropping up across these leaders who seem to be handling it really well, right? Like,
Yeah.
who are the leaders that everybody wants to work for? They love them. They'd go out for a beer with them, and yet they'd walk through fire for them. And their
Right.
teams were like overperforming, right? What was the magic ingredient? And many times those leaders couldn't even name it. I sort of had to tease it out of them.
Extrapolate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
what are
so
the 5 pillars? Yeah.
the pillars are, they've two of them start with you because you have to get your own house in order before you can be
Totally
empathetic. So
agree.
it's
Yep.
self-awareness and self-care, and
Yes.
then clarity, decisiveness, and joy, which
I
was an
love
element
those.
that was, we can talk about. That's always the one that kind of turns people's heads a little bit. But really, if you can work on those for yourself and work on infusing those into your team and into your culture, you're in a much better position to act with empathy and not have it all fall apart. To act with
Right.
empathy and actually get the best performance out of people, not the worst. And to still be able to stand your ground while still being, a kind human being to people at work.
This comes back to that both and philosophy that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Why is self-awareness and self-care, why is it so important? Why are those two components so important within the pillars? And are they potentially the most important, or are they just among the five? Like, how would you rank them
Oh,
even?
wow. I've never been asked that because they're not, the pillars are not necessarily meant to be linear, but you
Uh-huh.
kind of have to start with self-awareness no matter what, because you have to see which pillar needs shoring up. And
Right.
you
That's
can't
true.
do that if you have ego in the way, if you're like, no, I'm doing everything perfectly.
Hmm.
No, I don't recognize what I bring into the interaction or what I bring into the room. I spoke to the chief learning officer of TBWA worldwide on my podcast, Rhonda George Deniston, and we talked about what do current and future leaders need to be successful. I said, what's the most important trait? Without missing a beat, she said it was self-awareness.
I believe that. Yeah.
And that's not even about acumen. That's not even about communication ability. That's just, you recognize you're not the only person in the room, but you also
Mhm.
recognize how you show up and what you bring into the room.
The
So
impact that has on everybody else. I love that.
100%, and the impact it has on your project, right?
Yes.
So we know that command and control leadership is a dying paradigm. There's places for it. When people are charging into battle, there's a place for that. But it
True.
doesn't work for knowledge workers.
True.
So we need to adapt. So that understanding of what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses or my challenges, what do I need to work on, and being honest, right? Ego kills empathy. So being able to say, I know I have more to learn and ways to improve. And also, what are my triggers? What are my emotional triggers? So that when I'm in these conversations and I show up less than my best self, can I dissect that and say, what actually happened there in that conversation with Jessica that went horribly awry, or that performance review that went horribly awry? Like, first, what did I bring into it? Basics. Was I tired? Was I hungry?
Right.
Was I hungover? Like, how did I show up?
Was I all
How
of the
full,
above? No.
right, exactly. Or how full was my tank? But
Yeah.
also, looking at my approach. Am I too direct? Am I unclear and I just leave people confused and angry in the conversation because they don't understand what the hell I'm saying, right? That's a common one, especially if you're trying to be empathetic and you are dancing around things because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And then it's like, just say what you need to say. I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most important. And then you can see like, oh, where do I really need to shore up these other pillars? But even from a culture perspective, if your whole team kind of goes through this exercise of self-awareness and self-care, where does our team need to shore up its pillars
Yeah.
as a team organism?
I really love, I mean, I agree that it is the most important. And I've run into leaders and team members, and including myself at time. Like,
Mhm.
I try to be self-aware, but there's always room for continuous
Always.
improvement. What do you do in a situation where the leader, someone you are on the team with, you're following or would like to, they lack self-awareness? That's a very difficult,
I
I ask
know.
this selfishly because I've
I
had
know.
stakeholders and organizations, clients, where they have very little self-awareness. And
Hmm.
sometimes the conversation has gone well, other times it's not because of the blind spots. And I
Yeah.
love some advice on how to navigate that type of scenario and
Yeah.
bringing empathy in.
Hmm.
Do you have any advice for people who are in similar situations?
Oh boy, I've been in so many of those situations. And,
Yeah,
this is before I sort of quote unquote was studying empathy, but,
yeah,
going back, I can see how so many situations where I had a leader that was like that, and even beyond not self-aware, like actually
yeah,
psychologically abusive.
yeah,
I
yeah.
do see the role I could have played if I'd had more courage, if I'd had,
Mm,
if I had had my own triggers and my own emotions regulated, I could have maybe
mhm.
had a conversation that was like, hey, this is how your behavior is actually impacting the quality of the work, sort of like
Yes,
take the
yep.
emotion out of it for them to help them see that this is not just you attacking them as a person, but as like, hey, let's talk because here's what's going on in the team. And I know that's a luxury for some people because they might be in an environment where the person goes, you're fired for talking to me that way. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But there's 2 points I want to make about that.
yeah.
One is we cannot change other people. So I wrote this book hopefully so those leaders who have an inkling that something might be off might read it and say, oh, I actually don't know how I'm showing up. I don't know, if I even say in there, it's like, if you think you have nothing to work on, I promise
Promise
you, you're
you.
not
Yeah.
self-aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's those leaders that constantly have a growth mindset about their own performance. They don't think they've gotten to a certain level where no one needs to evaluate them, including themselves, right? So you can't change anyone else, but what you can do is you can show up in the interaction. And this is true in our personal relationships.
Mm,
We create the dynamic that we let someone else know is acceptable.
that's
And so
very,
you could
I like
show up
that.
in the conversation with all your empathy. It's not your job to make the other person empathetic, but you can show up by asking questions, by
Hmm.
staying emotionally regulated, by focusing on sharing common ground. Many of the tips I shared in the Empathy Edge, the book prior to this one,
Hmm.
you can show up and in your showing up that way and modeling that, it may not take one conversation, but very soon, it's going to be something where this other person knows this is what they need to expect when they interact with you.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of change the tenor of the conversation. And even in saying things like, hey, I'm taking the Enneagram because I want to make sure that I'm a better leader for my team. We never know our own blind spots. We never really know what we have to work on. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
get the other
Planting
person to
those
sort of plant
seeds.
that seed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like that.
But when you show up and you start modeling empathy and people realize you're getting things done by doing that, they're going to see, oh, I can have success acting that way and operating that way. But two, I also think you set a model for the person that you're interacting with who may not be the most empathetic person.
Right.
And you kind of set that expectation of, well, this is how I operate and this is how I do my best work. And
Yeah.
then maybe you can have a non-emotionally charged conversation with them that says, hey, like I'm on your side. And, because it's probably very fear based why they're not self aware. They don't want to
Yes.
hold up that mirror, but say, hey, I'm on your side. And we want to do, as a team, we want to do the best work we can do for you. But some of these things are going on that's actually impacting our ability
Getting
to
in the way.
deliver and to
Yeah.
deliver results. Are you open to hearing about it? And then, it's like I teach when my kid was 5, like use I statements. Don't say you do this and you do that, right?
Right.
But maybe you can have a conversation about that. Now that's super scary, especially if there's a power dynamic. I get it. And that's probably why I never had those conversations
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I was in that position. But, hindsight's 2020. And you look back and you're like, oh, maybe I should have had that conversation with her when I wasn't so emotionally charged. Maybe I should have waited a few days and then said, hey, let's go for coffee. Let's go have a talk that has nothing to do with the immediate issue that they could blame everything on, right?
I think that's wise advice. It
Yeah.
makes me think of
Easier said than done, I should
it
add.
is. It really is. It really is. I mean, what is the saying? Like, never go to bed angry. I'm like, that is the
Yeah.
worst advice ever because if you can just walk away for a little bit and come back to it with
Yeah.
less energy, have it the conversations less charged. I love all
Yeah.
that. That's really great
Yeah.
advice and feedback for individuals working with leaders who lack that empathy, lack that
Yeah.
self-awareness. How can they have
Right.
productive conversations versus
Uh-huh.
ones that are going to draw that fear and defensiveness out of the leader?
Right.
That's
One other
really
tip I want
helpful.
to share on that
Yeah.
is, let's say you are having a conversation with a very non-self-aware leader and they're
Mhm.
they're falling into berating you.
Yeah.
You can be the one to call a timeout on the
Mm.
conversation and say, I just need you to know I'm feeling really attacked and vulnerable right now because of the way that you're talking about this, but this is important to me. And I know it's important to you. And I really want to have this conversation with you, but I want to have this conversation in a better frame of mind to
Mm.
receive what you're saying, because the way you're saying it right now, I am automatically on the defensive. So can we talk about this
Right.
tomorrow? I mean, first of
Yeah.
all, when they pick their jaw up off the floor, they
Yeah.
might say
Yeah.
like,
Like
oh,
that.
okay. But you're
Yeah.
but you're
What a
immediately
moment.
showing an impact to them of the way they're approaching you with your ability to receive the information. And clearly they want to communicate this information. And you can just like, you can put it on yourself of like, I'm just not, anything you say right now, I'm not going to take in a good frame of mind because of the way you've approached me with it. So can we both
Honest,
take a time out?
vulnerable.
And you
Yeah.
can do that flip too. You can do that if you're the leader and someone's coming to you all guns blazing, it's like, hey,
Mhm.
I can tell this is really important to you, but you know that I have to leave at this time every Tuesday because my son has a soccer game and I hold that time sacred. But you are important and this is important. So I'm going to clear some time for tomorrow and let's talk about it then. And
I love
you can keep your boundaries while still that person knows they are seen, they are heard, and they are valued.
that's core. That was woven throughout your book too, the empathy dilemma, how that is a key. I mean, I hope people rewind this, listen to that entire thing again, because that is such
Let
a
me know how it
wonderful
goes.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so great, such great input and insights for people who are going through challenging conversations and moments at work, which happen all of the time, whether or not
Mm-hmm.
happening is just a part of, we bring our whole selves to the
Also,
to
yeah.
the to our work, which kind of gets us back to those 5 pillars. self
Yeah.
self-care, then you have decisiveness. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's
Of
the
clarity,
clarity,
decisiveness, and
decisiveness,
joy.
and joy. Can you talk through those as well?
Yeah, sure.
Clarity and why that's so important.
Yeah. So a common theme I noticed with folks that are empathetic, but also expect high performance is that they are very clear. They don't
Mm,
make assumptions. And that's clarity, however you want to slice it. It's clarity of like how our team treats each other, what
mhm,
our goals and our mission are, um, what my own boundaries are. I'm being really clear with you. I want you to be really clear with me. The
mhm.
the the curse of assumptions is with the like, well, we thought everyone knew that, right? And when
Right.
you have, we were talking before we recorded this idea of 5 generations in the workplace.
Yeah.
Boundaries mean something different to every generation. Professionalism means something different to every generation. Communication styles that are acceptable at work mean something different to every generation. So we
Yes.
can no longer just make these assumptions. We need to be painfully crystal clear, even to the point that it might be laughable, right?
Mhm.
And so, as you saw in the book, I profiled companies that create and high performing teams that have sort of a code of conduct, a code of like one of them called it a memorandum of understanding, but or a
Yeah.
culture code that just goes beyond the pretty bullet points. It's like, here's how we're actually going to get done our work as a team.
Which is so
And
important.
you get everyone to weigh in on that. And then you can have you end entitlement, first of all, because people then know what's expected of them and they know what they're being held accountable for.
That's huge. Yeah.
Um, but you also have something to go back to when people are underperforming of like, but we all agreed to this. So help me understand what
Mhm.
wasn't clear about, you know, some teams have people sign it, right? And so that clarity is so important because you cannot hold somebody to an expectation that you never set. And
That's
so what happens as you've probably seen is in the name of empathy, you're like, oh, but this, and here's all the excuses I'm going to make for that person because of this thing. But it turns out they just actually didn't know how you wanted it done, when you wanted it done, what they were responsible for. And so being able to really clearly map that out is kind, because otherwise you leave people going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what my goal is. I don't know how you want me to work. I remember working for a very, very inexperienced manager at the very beginning of my career who was a micromanager.
oh
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
and literally, it got to the point where I was doing this was in my change management career. I was doing slide decks and I was paralyzed for 45 minutes about whether to put the graphic on the top right or the top left
I've been
because
there.
all I was trying to do was predict what she was going to say.
Yeah.
And it kind of didn't matter because no matter what I did, it was the wrong thing.
It was, oh my gosh, this is, yes, I've
Yeah,
been
I'm sure
there.
everyone has that story, right? And so it's like,
Yeah.
if maybe, again, hindsight, clarity, like, what is it? Do you just actually want to create a template for me to use? Because I can do that. if that would make you feel better, because then I don't have to do a bunch of rework and
You
work
know,
myself up into anxiety because I'm trying to figure out where you want me to put a flipping graphic on a
yeah,
slide.
and it's not even the most important thing. The challenge with clarity is not as easy as it sounds. And
It's
I feel
not.
like that is an issue, maybe a systemic issue that kind of trickles down from the top,
Hmm.
unfortunately, or maybe
Hmm.
sideways or up, or I don't even, but in the
Yeah.
workplace, some recent clients that I've been working with, that lack of clarity
Hmm.
has led to unclear leaders driving unclear teams, driving unclear outcomes. And
Yes.
it's like, how do you solve for this?
Yeah.
Well, in the short term, they're bringing in more consulting firms to tell them how to do their job. I'm like, that's not the answer.
Right. Right.
But like, so how, when that lack of clarity, I mean,
Hmm.
having a strategy and goals, those are
Hmm.
important, but organizations, I mean, your strategy shouldn't change all the time. But
No.
for whatever reason, there seems to be, and this could be with, because of how quickly things are changing, how strong the desire is to keep pace with the pace of change.
Hmm.
What do you think how can we overcome the lack of clarity,
Hmm.
leveraging, what
Yeah.
you researched and learned?
Yeah. I think it comes down to, again, kind of finding that common ground and getting people involved in the process. So, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in the process of determining the strategic direction, but when it's determined, rolling it out in an email is not enough, right?
Yes,
We
this is
need to
like
have
change management 101
conversations.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we need to
yeah.
have discussion groups. We need to have, like, does everyone understand how this impacts? Jessica, do you understand how this impacts what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Hmm.
Will anything in here change the way you're going to do your work going forward? What's going to stay the same? What's going to be different? And then I can give you an opportunity to say, is this written clearly? Do you
Hmm.
understand what this means? Do you understand where your performance metrics and your KPIs align with the strategic direction we're trying to go in? I think there's an assumption
Huge.
that that just magically happens. And honestly,
Totally
I've
agree.
never worked for a company that's done that well, where
Yeah.
I understand the largest company strategic initiatives and how my role in, like, a 100,000 person company actually rolls up into that, because my team, your immediate team, and
Yeah.
all the teams in between haven't had conversations around that,
Yeah.
and to say,
I mean,
like, we need to be clearer about this.
what an opportunity for organizations. And this also lends itself to the another pillar, decisiveness. I think that
Hmm.
can contribute to clarity. Can you talk a little bit about decisiveness as one of the pillars?
Yeah, yeah. I really noticed that the folks who were embracing empathy in a detrimental way, I'll just put it that way, because there's no right or wrong, but the ones that were sort of leaning into people pleasing and submission,
Uh-huh.
um, they were scared to make a decision, and not even scared is the right word, uncomfortable making a decision, because they thought they could make a decision based on consensus. And
Mm,
that would make them empathetic. That the only way to be an empathetic leader is that everybody's happy, everybody has input, everybody, has to agree with every decision. And what I noticed with a lot of the successful leaders was this concept of disagree but commit. And
yeah.
how they got people to disagree but commit was, A, they didn't do what some people could interpret this as like, oh, this means I'm a dictator and I just decide everything.
Right.
No, we're still saying you want to synthesize input and value everyone's point of view, but are you synthesizing those points of view in a swift way so
Hmm.
that you can eventually come to a decision? And then can you communicate it clearly back to
Hmm.
the team as to why you made the decision? I find that this is from my change management 101 work, is
Hmm.
when people are engaged in the process, they see how the sausage is made,
Yep.
they have more buy-in,
That's right.
and they might be able to say, well, I was part of that conversation where that took place, and that was not my idea. But now that you're explaining it back to me about why my idea wasn't going to fly, but this other idea was going to fly, it makes sense to me. And you can still encourage me to give input, that I'm not going to walk away going, well, it doesn't matter what I say anyway, because they're not going to do what I want.
Yeah.
You want to
They have
continue
more
to.
empathy in that situation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so,
Reciprocity.
you'll find that then they become your biggest champions because they understand. And now when someone else attacks the decision, they can go, no, I was in the room where it happened. I know how this went. And I can communicate to you that this was all considered. And not even my idea was the one that, quote unquote, won. But the empathetic thing to do after you make that decision is to be transparent and communicate why the decision was made that way,
Right.
so that you have the opportunity to thank everyone for their input. Jessica, that was actually a really great idea you had. I want you to keep those coming for this particular initiative. Here's why that wasn't going to make the most sense, but that was actually a brilliant idea. And maybe we can find a way to implement that in a future initiative.
Gosh,
Boom. Instead of shutting you down, right?
yeah. And that creates an environment where you can be innovative, you can fail forward, you can do all of those things without, fear of feeling silly for your ideas or having them
Right.
be fully rejected, which I think is so
Right.
important for an innovative, change ready culture too. Well, how about joy? Let's finish up with joy, and then if there's anything related to
My favorite one.
anything else in the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But why is joy? Why did you include joy? Why is that so
So
important?
it's funny because when I first started writing the book a few years ago, I only had 4 pillars, and I was like, something's missing. Like the secret sauce of the people I've actually spoken to. And I just kind of went back through the research. I started doing a lot of research around the use of improv to create psychologically safe and creative and resilient teams. I interviewed a ton of people on my podcast that bring a lot of humor and levity to work and all of the studies around that. And then some work by a good friend of mine, Shasta Nelson, around friendships at work and how there are studies out there that show that if you have a best friend at work, you are more engaged, the quality of your output is better, you have less absent days, and you stay with the company longer. And in environments where it matters, you have less dangerous incidents, you have higher safety.
Yeah.
Because you care about the people that you are with, and it becomes a place you want to go back to.
Yes.
So what joy is not, is it's not that the work is joyful at every moment. Like we still need to do invoice reimbursements. We still need to do spreadsheets, right?
Yes.
All of these things. But it just means that there's a lightness to the work that I even, in some studies I saw in like emergency rooms and like high stakes workplaces where you wouldn't think joy would be part of it. But it's this idea, it's not that you have to be the funniest person in the room or you have to be a comedian as a leader, because some leaders are not built that way.
Right.
But are you creating an environment where people can feel safe? Are you creating an environment where people can have a little bit of levity and laugh at themselves and even like celebrate failure? Are you creating an environment where people get to know each other for as much as much as they're comfortable on a personal basis? And are you encouraging workplace friendships? Are you encouraging bonding? Are you encouraging not the forced bonding, but are you encouraging genuine moments of bonding? And you can do that with hybrid teams, you can do that with remote teams, and of course you can do that with in-person teams.
Yeah.
But understanding that that's a key ingredient to getting high performance out of your team, because it actually respects who they are as people. And that's why it makes it into this idea of being an empathetic leader, but an effective one, because you are letting people be who they are, express who they are, express their ideas, and do it in a safe environment. And when there's that element of levity and joy, it's fertile ground for it to take root.
What a wonderful way of putting that. And I have seen that over and over again in my own career. And it makes the tough conversations, the ones you want to deliver with empathy, so much, I'm not going to say easier, but it's
more comfortable.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you included as one of your pillars and didn't leave that out.
I know. I had a leader who told me, and I think it made it in the book. It's hard to tell with like the final edits, but there was a leader who told me that, I try to create joy when I can, because then when things get hard and I ask something of someone that's not as joyful, or it's harder, or I'm asking them for extra work, they trust me because they know that I wouldn't be asking unless I needed it.
Oh,
and you can only really create that kind of trust if there's some levity there. It's like, oh, well, you see me as a person, and we can like talk to each other. We don't have to be best friends outside of work, but I met my husband at work, so.
So
but I think
go in that direction too. Yeah.
And I want to add on that, because that's a lot for some leaders, that's a lot of pressure. They say like, how am I going to inject joy into my team? You don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to go into your office and cook up this joy recipe and then present it to the team. Like, tell the team, I want us to have a little bit more fun. I want us to be able to relax so that our cognitive abilities are operating at their full capacity, right? So what are your ideas? What are some things, or encourage it? If you see people, creating a cool Slack channel for like what you had for lunch,
Yeah.
encourage that. Don't discourage that kind of like camaraderie and
Yes. Yeah.
jovialness, because it'll help people do their best work. They don't always have to be work, 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 work every second. They'll burn out.
Yeah. Oh, and so coming full circle, this all gets back to the original ethos or statement: cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. So bringing that all
Exactly.
together, I love that so much. Um, One more question. Do we have time? Oh, let's see. Okay, one more question, and then I'll let you go because I know your time is so
I love
valuable.
it. I love it.
How can leaders develop more empathy?
Oh, wow. Well, okay. My whole first empathy book, The Empathy Edge, has a whole
Okay.
section on how to
All
build
right.
your empathy. And there's habits and practices that you can do to basically take yourself to the empathy gym and strengthen the muscle. So I'm actually glad you asked this, because we as human beings are born innately with empathy. Science has proven this, for maybe barring some psychopathic
Right.
tendencies, but
Yeah.
or psychopathies, I should say, different psychopathies. Um, so what happens is, for some of us, the muscle atrophies
Mm,
based on environment, based on, was it rewarded? Was it celebrated? Was it modeled?
yeah.
So the good news is you can make an intentional decision as an adult to say, I want to be more empathetic,
Mm,
but you have to practice it. And you might, just like a workout, you might feel sore. It might feel uncomfortable.
yeah.
But the more you practice it, the more you build that muscle memory. So building the practice of active listening, building the practice of mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
silencing the noise in your own head so I can be present for you without defensiveness or fear, getting used to asking questions and asking more questions than
Mm-hmm.
you answer.
Yeah.
Finding a way to get curious about what is the other person's point of view, instead of just assuming it's this or assuming it's that. And this is also where I encourage people to binge Netflix, because if you watch documentaries, movies, consume art, biographies, plays, theater, you can learn how to practice that empathy muscle with people that are different from you by just putting
Yeah.
yourself in front of it and saying, oh, what would that be like for me? What's that like for them? How would I feel? And practicing that. That's how they teach it to young kids, is
Yeah.
like reading them books and saying, look at their face. What does it look, what does it look like they're feeling when you see that face? We need to do that as adults sometimes.
And that gets to the empathy and action, bringing in some of that compassion too. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much. I've really loved this conversation. And I have no doubt people who are watching, listening are going to get so much out of it. I will be listening to this multiple times over just so everything sinks in. Where can
Yeah.
people find you, find your books? You've got your
Yeah.
latest one that's launched. So where's the best place to get in
I
touch
love it.
or get your books?
Well, yeah. So the books are available everywhere. Books are available.
Perfect.
There's an audiobook, there's ebook and print. And then my hub is red-slice.com. So red-slice, that's my main business. You can find my books, my speaking, my courses and free resources are there. And then they can find me on the socials on LinkedIn, Maria J. Ross, or Instagram, Red Slice Maria on Instagram.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thanks again for your time and your wisdom and energy. I'm so grateful, and I wish you so much success. And I hope everybody gets this book and all your other books, because it is just a wealth of knowledge, and
Thank
pretty
you.
transformative, powerful message. It resonated so deeply with me today. Thank
Oh, I'm
you
so
again.
glad. Thank you for the work you do too.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Maria, take care. Have a great rest of your day.